Good afternoon. In a short while, we will be joined by our friend Achim Steiner, the administrator of the UN Development Program, who is also the co-chair of the high-level dialogue on energy, as well as Damilola Ogumbiyi, the special representative of the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of the high-level dialogue on energy. They'll join us virtually to brief on the ministerial thematic forum for the high-level dialogue on energy, which is taking place. I see they're already connected, so we will do this right after you're all done with me. As expected, the Secretary General arrived in Brussels this morning. He spoke to the press alongside the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, a short while ago. He expressed his deep gratitude and appreciation for the European Union and the European Commission's support for the work of the United Nations. As we see the rise in populism, racism, xenophobia, and other forms of hatred, Mr. Guterres said he counts on the European Union to be at the forefront of the battle of what he described the values of the Enlightenment. Following this, the Secretary General engaged in a conversation with the College of Commissioners of the EU. They discussed a wide range of topics, including climate, sustainable development, and pandemic recovery. It was agreed to hold these exchanges on a more regular basis. The Secretary General also spoke, but this time via pre-recorded message, to the opening of the Berlin II conference that took place on Libya, which took place in Berlin. He told the gathered participants that the full implementation of the ceasefire is of paramount importance to consolidate peace in Libya. He added that he was encouraged by the continued investment in confidence-building measures by both sides. The Secretary General said the UN is committed to supporting the Libyan ceasefire monitoring mechanism and that the initial group of UN ceasefire monitors will be deployed to Tripoli soon. He said that we must put an end to all the foreign interference, including the full withdrawal of all foreign forces and mercenaries from Libya. He also urged Libyan and external parties to agree on a comprehensive plan with clear timelines to achieve this goal, which the UN mission stands ready to support. The Secretary General urged Libya's House of Representatives to clarify the constitutional basis for the elections and to adopt the necessary legislation. But he also urged the interim executive authority to provide support, including financial resources, to the High National Electoral Commission. And noting the humanitarian challenges, the Secretary General called on the member states to support the Libyan humanitarian response plan, and which we request $189 million for to support the most vulnerable, and that is just 21% funded. The video and the text were released to you. The Secretary General will also speak this time via live video link this afternoon to the Security Council meeting on Syria, which starts at 3 p.m. He will be speaking from Brussels. In those remarks, he will call for support for the most recent humanitarian appeal, which seeks $4.2 billion. That's the UN's largest humanitarian appeal, as far as I know, to ease the country's plight. Another $5.8 billion is being requested to support refugees in the region. He will also express to the council members how important it is to maintain and expand access to including cross-border and cross-line operations. Those remarks will be we've shared those under embargo with you. And we are told by the U.S. mission to the UN that Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield is expected to speak to the stakeout after the Security Council meeting on Libya. This morning, in another video message, the Secretary General addressed the opening segment of the Humanitarian Affairs segment of the Economic and Social Council. He said that in many parts of the world, the pandemic has brought suffering on top of an already existing and deteriorating humanitarian crises, which are too often driven by prolonged conflict, climate crisis, and economic fragility. He said UN agencies, governments, partners are all scaling up to deliver food, cash, nutrition, health, water, and sanitation assistance to countries at greater risks. He called on all member states to urgently provide $35 billion needed to stop more human tragedies from unfolding. He also urged all countries to ensure that humanitarian agencies are fully able to safely access and provide assistance to all in need. Finally, he called on all members to generously support COVAX facility, which has delivered vaccines to millions of people, noting many more vaccines and funds are desperately needed. And I wanted to flag, speaking of dire humanitarian situation, I did want to flag the ongoing situation in Madagascar, which is particularly dire. And we are told that from our humanitarian colleagues on the ground that for the first time ever, the most alarming phase of the integrated food security classification, which is labeled a catastrophe, has been recorded in pockets of southern Madagascar. Severe hunger has hit the Grand Sud area and the hardest, with communities witnessing an almost total disappearance of food sources due to an exceptionally prolonged drought, the most severe in the past 10 years. More than 1.14 million people in southern Madagascar are food insecure. Of those, an estimated 14,000 are already in catastrophic condition, and the number will double to 28,000 by October. The gravity of the situation is for thousands of people to flee their homes in search of food, while those remaining have resorted to extreme coping measures for survival, like foraging for wild food. WFP said the lives of children are at stake as the nutrition situation among children under the age of 5 is deteriorating. David Beasley, the head of WFP, visited southern Madagascar last week and said the situation is enough to bring even the most hardened humanitarian to tears. Now is the time to stand up and act and keep supporting the Malagasy government to turn the tide of climate change and help save lives. WFP is asking for $80 million to provide life-saving food in the next lean season and to stop preventable tragedy from unfolding before our eyes. And we hope to bring you senior WFP official to speak to you on Madagascar later this week. Also, I want to flag from Afghanistan that the government has officially declared a drought yesterday, with most of the country facing extreme or severe drought conditions. This is the second drought to affect Afghanistan in 4 years. The country has been facing food insecurity and malnutrition crisis compounded by La Nina. Nearly a third of the country is facing crisis or emergency levels of food insecurity. Nearly half of all children under 5 are expected to face acute malnutrition in Afghanistan. In addition to the drought, escalating conflict and devastating new wave of COVID-19 have increased humanitarian needs and vulnerability. The UN, as was said yesterday's meeting, is committed to staying and delivering. In face of the rising needs, $1.3 billion is required to help almost 16 million people through 2021 in Afghanistan. Halfway into the year, only 23% of the funds have been received. We urge donors to pledge. And back here in the Security Council this morning, council members heard from Mankeur Ndiaye, the head of the UN Peacekeeping Mission in the Central African Republic and the Special Secretary General's representative there. He expressed, among other things, his concern at the negative consequences born out of the continuing offensive by government forces as well as bilateral forces and others in the fight against rebel groups. He noted the high level of human rights violations documented against these forces, which he said could put at risk the progress seen in social cohesion in the country. He also called for the Security Council's support for the mission as it implements its mandate in the face of growing hate speech and incitement to violence against peacekeepers and our partners in the Central African Republic. His comments were shared with you. Also want to flag that Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the head of peace operations for the UN, is wrapping up his visit to Russia. He will be heading off to visit the UN peacekeeping mission in Cyprus tomorrow. During his 4-day visit, Mr. Lacroix will meet with representatives of 2 communities on the island. He will also meet with the special representative and the head of the mission, Elizabeth Spehar, and mission personnel, and he will visit various key locations where the mission is deployed along the buffer zone. And in Myanmar, our colleagues on the country team there said today they remain deeply concerned over the continued use of use of force against children nearly 5 months after the military took over the government. We call again on security forces to refrain from violence and keep children and young people out of harm's way. According to UNICEF, as of this Monday, at least 60 children have reportedly been killed since February, while the countless others have been seriously injured. And UNHCR announced today that 1.47 million refugees will be in need of resettlement this year. They said that despite the pandemic, war and conflict continues to rage across the world, displacing millions and barring many from coming home. And today is International Widows' Day. In his message for the day, the Secretary General pays attention to the importance of the inheritance laws and social safety nets that should ensure that the world's 250 million widows are protected. Human rights, including the right to inherit and own property, should not be contingent on marital status, he says. Citing the persecution and disinheritance of widows by law and custom, one of the world's worst examples of gender discrimination, the Secretary General urges every country to pass and implement legislation and policies that promote gender equality and to repeal all discriminatory laws that perpetuate women's subjugation and exclusion. This is a critical element of the call to action on human rights. Other press encounters today, we expect that members of the 8th 3+1 group of the Security Council, that's the ambassadors of Kenya, Niger, Tunisia, and St. Vincent's, and the Grenadines will brief reporters outside the Security Council stakeout following the consultations on the Central African Republic. And tomorrow at 1:30 in this room, there will be a briefing by Filippo Carlos Sola, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Argentina. Pam.
Thank you, Steph. There's a draft report from the UN IPCC. It's not published yet, but it was leaked to a media organization that says climate change will fundamentally reshape life on Earth, even if humans can tame planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. Can you confirm that that's what the report says? And since it's been leaked, is it possible to get a copy of the report? Thank you.
No, I can't confirm because I have not seen the report. I've only seen the reporting on it. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, works outside of this secretariat, so you would have to contact them. I mean, I just have not seen the report being distributed.
And there's no way the secretariat can request this report now that
well, I mean,
it's
it's done by the IPCC, so you have to, and I understand your frustration, but you have to contact the people who wrote the report, or the IPCC panel. That's what I can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Senora.
Gracias. Thanks, Stéphane. So Nicaragua made news yesterday and has been making news for the past 3 weeks with the detentions of opposition leaders. You have made several statements about how the Secretary General is worried about it. What is the next step for the Secretary General beyond the statements that he has made? Human Rights Watch is calling him to operate with Article 99. Is a possibility? Is he in talks to the government? What can you tell us?
No, I mean, I think the Secretary General has repeatedly said how concerned he is about this wave of arrests, the detentions that we've seen, the invalidation of candidacies. It's very important that the authorities in Nicaragua uphold international human rights obligations. They need to release the political prisoners and social leaders. And there needs to be some sort of broad-based agreement on measures towards elections that are credible, that are transparent, that are participatory, the elections that are scheduled for November. The High Commissioner for Human Rights has also expressed her views, which are very much in line, very clear, in line with what the Secretary General said, and very clear. And we always stand ready to engage with the authorities.
Just a follow-up. Wouldn't this be a time to just involve the Security Council? Ortega has not shown any signs to ease up his actions, and also he has just redoubled with implementations. Our own journalists had been questioned and taken. So would Article 99 will be a way to do it? Maybe not openly, but in a way of getting the Security Council?
I think we've expressed our concerns very clearly on the situation, both publicly and privately to member states. I will leave it at that. Celia.
Stéphane, did the Secretary General talk with the ambassador of China about the closure and the arrestation of journalists in Hong Kong?
the Secretary General, as far as I know, has not had a contact with the ambassador of China. We have expressed our opinion on this and also reiterated the need reiterated our principle, which the Secretary General said even to all of you, I think, the day of his election, which is that independent media is really a pillar of an open and participatory society.
I have another question. Talking about human rights, now that we have a new, not so new Secretary General, will Aurora, the young lady who wanted to become Secretary General, be able to go back to work without facing retaliation?
Of course. I mean, she took, from what I understand, a leave of absence from her employers. The Secretary General in no way was involved, has had no contact or discussion about her employment status. She decided, from what I gather, to take special leave without pay. Of course, there's no question about her status or anything to that matter. Kristen, and then we'll go to some in the back.
Thanks, Stéphane. Has the Secretary General seen this terrible airstrike in Tigray that killed dozens of people? Experts have told Al Jazeera that the only entity responsible could be the Ethiopian government. Given concerns about the humanitarian situation there, is there any reaction to that?
We've definitely seen the reports, and I think, to tell you, the Secretary General is deeply alarmed by what he's seen, by the reports of civilian casualties on this airstrike, which reportedly took place yesterday in Togoga. Our focus right now initial focus has been on trying to get life-saving interventions. Some of the most critically wounded people, from what we gather, were evacuated by ambulances last night and this morning. We have requested access to the area to assess the situation and see how we can provide assistance. But so far, we've not been able to. The situation in the area remains very, very volatile. It's important that everyone engaged in fighting do their utmost to protect civilians, to obey international humanitarian law. Once again, we want to see an end to all hostilities in the region. We want to see greater access for humanitarian workers. And frankly, from what we've seen here, things are not going in the right direction, to say the least. Ibtisam and then Benno.
Thank you, Steph. First on Libya. So, according to news report, the foreign minister in Berlin, she said that there is some movement, positive developments regarding foreign fighters. Are you aware of that? And then also, what do you, could you update us on the UN mission, the observers in Libya, and what's happening there? And then I have something about Syria.
We've seen what the foreign minister said. I have nothing to confirm or one way or another to corroborate what she said. We want to see that kind of. It's very important for us to see that kind of progress. We've been calling for a long time for foreign fighters, mercenaries, however you want to call them, to leave Libya. As the Secretary General said, we expect an initial dispatch of UN staff for the observers to be dispatched to Tripoli soon, but I have no exact date for you.
Syria and the meeting today, as you know, in all Security Council meetings on the humanitarian issue in Syria, Russia and also China are doubting actually the need of the cross-border aid. What's your message to them, especially that they don't seem to be convinced of what you are saying? What do you say to them?
Well, the Secretary General, I think, has made his position very clear that we feel we need the continued access to northwest Syria through the cross-border operation, that it is a critical element in providing humanitarian assistance to millions of men, women, and children who are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. We are also working on cross-line deliveries, but there's been, I think, as we all know, very little progress on that front. That will be the Secretary General's message today at the Security Council in front of all the members of the Security Council.
Just to follow up, have you been involved with them directly on this issue to try to?
The Secretary General made this point publicly and privately in recent meetings with key member states on this issue. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Okay, Benno.
This is pretty much what Ibtisam was asking as well. We saw that oral note from Mr. Lavrov to the SG, and I wonder if the SG actually answered to that. The note basically, I think, laid the groundwork for Russia vetoing everything till for an extension of that resolution. So was there any direct answer to that oral note that came in the last days?
Look, there's an ongoing dialogue between the Secretariat and member states that are critical to this, to what we hope will be a positive outcome and extend the resolution. Again, I would urge you to read what the Secretary General will say this afternoon, which I think in itself it's not it's a declaration of what his position is, and you can do the compare and contrast. Okay, let's go to the screen, see if we have any questions. Majid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have a question about Syria, the same question, a follow-up on the humanitarian cross-border. Foreign Minister, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov said that there's absolutely no need for that cross-border. And he also talked about an intentional sabotage of coordinated effort to send humanitarian aid basically through Damascus to northwest Syria. Do you confirm that? And what is your response for the Russians when they say there's no need for the cross-border? You can do that through Damascus.
Majid, I think I've answered this question quite a few times over the last couple of days. You have what the Secretary General will say. You've seen what he has said repeatedly. You've seen what Mark Lowcock has said and other humanitarian officials. We feel that there is a critical need for the continuation of access of the cross-border checkpoint through between Turkey and Syria to access the millions of people who need humanitarian aid. That's our position. It's based on our assessment of the situation on the ground. And I can assure you from the UN side, no one is trying to sabotage anything.
Thank you.
Michelle and then Carrie. Michelle Nichols. Okay, Carrie, do you want to go ahead? Carrie Newton?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Steph. Do you hear me well?
Yep.
Hi, Steph. Super. Can we know a bit more, please, about Jean-Pierre Lacroix's trip, the goal of his visit in Russia, please, who he met, that would be interesting, and how it is linked to the situation in Central African Republic, where Russian mercenaries on site have been said to misbehave more and more against MINUSCA personnel and blue helmets, as Mr. Lacroix asked Moscow for a better management of the Russian instructors.
Mr. Lacroix was there to represent the United Nations at an annual security conference that is held in Moscow. So that was the reason why he was there. While he was there, he met with senior Russian Defense Ministry officials to discuss issues obviously related to peacekeeping, but also issues related to the safety of peacekeepers in the field. Okay, Abdelhamid, and then we'll try Michelle.
Sorry, Steph,
yes, go ahead.
Including Central African Republic, because it has been particularly, I mean, it
No,
was discussed this morning again.
This is where, I mean, I think the issue of safety of peacekeepers in Central African Republic was laid out by Mr. Ndiaye during this morning's briefing. As for what Mr. Lacroix discussed, I will leave it that he discussed the safety of peacekeepers as well as other general peacekeeping issues.
Thank you, Steph.
Okay, Abdelhamid, and then we'll try Michelle Nichols again, and then we'll go to our guest.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have two questions, but if you also, when you answer, if you have an answer to my question yesterday about the WHO and the 1 million vaccine that Israel sold to the PA and they were expired.
No, what I think, no, the answer was that for you to contact WHO. I don't have anything else from my end. Your question, sir.
My question, the foreign minister of Sudan sent a letter to the Security Council calling for an urgent meeting or a meeting as soon as possible on the Renaissance Dam. Have you seen the letter, Stéphane, and can you share some of the information in the letter, and if you expect the Security Council to meet based on that request?
I have not. Sorry, I have not seen the letter. The letter, if a request for a meeting, I assume will be addressed to the presidency of the council. So you may want to check with the Estonians. Permanent mission. As soon as a meeting is announced, we'll obviously confirm that it'll be on the schedule.
My second question about Afghanistan. The U.S. is the third superpower that is defeated in Afghanistan, if I can call that. England was defeated between 1839 and 1842. Russia, the Soviet Union, stayed there 10 years between 1979 and 1899. And now the U.S., after 20 years, is leaving without making any real success there. So is there a lesson that the UN can take about foreign domination and foreign intervention and foreign occupation?
Listen, I barely made it through university, so I'm not going to engage in a lengthy discussion on the history of Afghanistan, which we all know. I mean, in all seriousness, the UN's message is that everyone needs to think first and foremost about the people of Afghanistan, and we need to be there to support them. The UN and its partners, as was said very clearly by Deborah Lyons, will stay. And we are staying and we're delivering for the people of Afghanistan. And our only focus is the well-being of the people of Afghanistan, with a special focus, obviously, on the rights of women, which have made gains recently in Afghanistan. We want to make sure that the status of women, the status of minority, does not go backwards in any way, shape, or form. Okay.